Give me one moment. Okay. This isn't usually the type of makeup I wear. I prefer makeup that is more dramatic, but Malachite did this because we had therapy a little bit ago. Okay. 3 videos from Kati Morton, who is known as the worst therapist I've heard. Apparently someone already disliked this video. So I'm just going to get right into it. And we will see. Like I always say, do not attack or harass any of these people. These videos are made for educational purposes to correct misinformation, using both our own experiences as someone who lives with DID and from a long list of sources, which we will have in the pinned comment once this goes up on YouTube.
Hey everybody, today we're going to talk about dissociative identity disorder, otherwise known as multiple personality disorder. And if any of you have been a long-time viewer, you know that I had a video come out a long time ago that was titled this. But what I actually talked about in that video is maladaptive daydreaming. And I'll link that video here because it's my bad that I mislabeled it and then made...
Okay. We have an issue. It's my bad that I mislabeled that video. That is not an apology. That is not how you address something like that. Especially from a mental health professional licensed in the US. And I thought licensed marriage and family therapist, so she is not a trauma specialist. She is not someone who deals with PTSD or dissociative disorders. This is a licensed marriage and family therapist.
otherwise known as multiple personality disorder. And if any of you have been a long-time viewer, you know that I had a video come out a long time ago that was titled this. But what I actually talked about in that video is maladaptive daydreaming. And I'll link that video here because it's my bad that I mislabeled it and then made a thumbnail that didn't quite appropriately identify the video. And the truth of it is that when I was watching that video, I started out talking about DID and then I went into maladaptive daydreaming and never came back. So I apologize, but let's get into the real nitty-gritty about what DID.
I just hope that that mistake was corrected as soon as she noticed.
Since this is a diagnosis, I am looking into my DSM, and I'm going to read to you the diagnostic criteria, And then I'm going to come back and go through the first two criteria because there's so much to be said about these. And then I'll finish with what treatment options are available. Okay? So let's get going. The diagnostic criteria reads that dissociative identity disorder can be diagnosed if there is a disruption of identity characterized by two or more distinct personality states, which may be described in some cultures as an experience of possession. So what that really means is that we're experiencing a whole nother personality, okay? These signs and symptoms may be observed by others or reported by the individual. That is the A. B.
Okay. Having alters is more than just having a whole other personality. Alter is short for alternate state of identity or alternate state of consciousness. It's not just having a different personality. So that waters it down and makes it sound less severe than it is.
B, recurrent gaps in the recall of everyday events. There's a lot of amnesia that's associated with this, where people won't remember whole chunks of time, whole periods of their life, and whole chunks of their day and what they did. They may wake up and notice, like wake up from that state and see they've purchased something that no one else could have purchased for them.
Hello. Good to see you. Thank you for the follow. I hope that you are doing well.
Or drew something that they know they had to create, yet they have no memory of doing either of those things. Now C says the symptom.
That is not the correct. That is not all of that diagnostic points. Let me see. Okay. Good, that worked. Okay. DSM-5 criteria. So she simply stopped at recurring gaps in the recall of everyday events, but the actual full criteria is recurrent gaps in the recall of everyday events, important personal information, and or traumatic events that are inconsistent with ordinary forgetting. I'm going to keep this up because I have a feeling I might need it.
Symptoms cause, and this is like all diagnoses, it says a symptom has caused clinically significant distress or impairment in social, occupational, or other areas of functioning. So it's impairing our functioning. Now the fourth.
Yes, it's a disorder. It has to cause disorder in your life.
Fourth, or the letter D, is that the disturbance is not a normal part of broadly accepted cultural or religious practice. And they also note that this isn't like kids having imaginary friends or play dates. That's kind of something that children go through, and that's not DID, okay? And the last is that it cannot be attributable to the psychological effects of the substance. So this can't be because someone is high or on drugs, and that's something that should be assessed. If you're a clinician thinking someone may have this, you may make sure they do, a blood or urine sample to make sure that there are no drugs in their system. Now, like I said, we're going to go into more detail in the first two criteria.
Hold on.
You are on drugs, and that's something that should be assessed. If you're a clinician thinking someone may have this,
I don't know who disliked this video, but yes, this is a therapist online well known for spreading misinformation from what I know and have been told. The dislike was already there when I opened the video. She says if you're a clinician who suspects that their client may have DID, you should do tests on that client, like physical tests. A therapist should never do any sort of tests like that. I actually do not know if she is right wing. If your therapist is trying to do tests like that, that is not a therapist. That is not something that should ever be happening. You could I would even say that you shouldn't ask them to go to a general practitioner because you're not owed their physical medical history. I'm not entirely sure how that would work. But no, it should not happen.
You may make sure they do, blood or urine sample to make sure that there are no drugs in their system. Now, like I said, we're going to go into more detail in the first two criterion. Now, the first one, if you remember, was that there's a disruption of identity characterized by two or more distinct personality states. And they talk even more about how people with dissociative identity disorder may report feeling that they've suddenly become depersonalized. Almost like we talk about in dissociation, because this...
Not almost like we talk about in dissociation. It's dissociative identity disorder. Dissociative. Dissociation. It's dissociation. Depersonalization and derealization are parts of dissociating. So it's not different. It's not just similar, it's the same thing. It is the same thing.
Is a dissociative disorder. We talk about in dissociation where you can feel like you're kind of out of body, like watching yourself do something. Many who have DID report feeling that very same way. Many also report they'll have these really strong impulses that they normally would never have, or things that feel like they're not even their own, but they have to do it and they're compelled to do it and they're not sure why. And it feels very ego dystonic, meaning it's not comfortable to have this. This isn't something that feels good to us. It feels against who we are.
That could be said for just someone who's impulsive. These are very broad things that she's not really explaining very well.
Some even report feeling like a whole different person. They may feel extremely large and muscular. Others report feeling really small and childlike. Some even feel that they're the opposite gender, or some will smoke when they would never smoke. There are a lot of characteristics that feel unlike ourselves and not related to us or associated with us at all. We have no control over them kind of taking over our bodies. Now we're moving.
Where do I even start with that? I don't even know what to say about that. It's...
Moving on to the second criteria, or criterion B. And if you remember, it's when we have those gaps in memory, or the amnesia that's associated with DID. And they talk about this because DID is a trauma-caused disorder. People who have DID have had a severe trauma in their past, and many of them don't even remember it. If you want more information on this, you can click over here to my...
So it's not just one trauma, it's prolonged trauma that the child feels like they cannot survive. For example, being in a car crash, yes, that is traumatic. It's not going to cause DID.
My repressed memories video, but I just wanted to start off with that because that's why there's amnesia associated with DID. Okay, now I'm reading from my DSM again.
The amnesia in DID is because amnesia walls were put up to protect the child from the memories of that trauma. So when alters form and develop, apologies, those walls don't just suddenly go away. And they're completely separated.
But they say that the dissociative amnesia of individuals with DID manifests in 3 ways. The first being gaps in remote memory of personal life events, like they won't remember portions of their childhood. The second is lapses in dependable memory, like what happened today, or maybe I have a well-learned skill, like at my work, I work on computers, and now I can't even remember how to do that, and I have no idea how I ever did it. And the third is that discovery of evidence of their everyday actions and tasks they don't recollect. Like before when I was telling you that maybe they'll wake up and
Maybe. That must be expanded on in the physical copy of the DSM, because I'm not seeing it.
and they'll have a new pair of jeans and a painting that there's no one else in the house, no one else would have bought that or created that, and they know it's them, but they have no memory of it happening. They even talk about people with DID having what we call dissociative fugues. Now, a dissociative fugue is when you will not remember, you'll dissociate and not remember travel, getting somewhere. There was an article when I was researching about this where someone woke up from a dissociative state in Japan. They had no idea why they were going there. They didn't know why they got on the plane. Was it work related? Was it for fun travel? They had no idea, and it can be really frightening. And just for clarification, know that the amnesia that I'm talking about isn't relegated to only the trauma that I've experienced. It would be something that maybe just happened in my regular everyday life. There's amnesia throughout people with DID's life, and it has nothing to do with the trauma necessarily. It can just be me going about my day and I have no recollection of it. But the good news is that recovery is possible. There are treatment options, things that we can do. Because when I was researching this, I found out that 70% of people with DID have attempted suicide, and multiple attempts are common. So if you're out there and you're struggling, or someone you know is struggling, and you're feeling hopeless, know that you're not alone. Know that there are things that we can do so that this dissociation and the amnesia that comes along with it can go away. Now, I'm sure there
it's never going to just go away. Dissociation is a normal part of human experience, even if you do not have a dissociative disorder. Everyone dissociates at some point. So it's not just going to go away. It can lessen, but she's making it sound like there's some sort of magical cure, and there's not.
There are a lot of ways to treat trauma, because if you remember, DID is something that is caused by trauma. So EMDR, any of the treatments that I talked about in my PTSD video, you can click here to go there, will help with this. But just with regard to DID, know that the whole goal of treatment is what they call final fusion, meaning that we're...
No. I know this is 8 years old at this point, I thought it said. Eight years ago. Final fusion is one of the treatment paths that a system can choose to go through. There is also functional multiplicity. Final fusion is where all of the alters will fuse together into one singular person. So there will only be that one person and no other alters. Functional multiplicity is where you integrate, so you work on communication, you work on the lowering of amnesia barriers, you work through trauma, but you don't fuse into one singular person. There are still separate alters that just work together. That is currently the treatment goal that we have for us.
We're trying to integrate all of the different multiple personalities or other personality states, that's what they call them, right? Or can all come back together and we can be one whole self again. So that is the ultimate goal of treatment. And they recommend talk therapy. As with all trauma work, it's really, really important that the client is ready and motivated to change, because this can be really difficult. Trauma work is hard. If any of you out there are working on trauma, I know how hard it is. I know how exhausting it can be. I know that a lot of you who have done EMDR in the comments below that video told me that you just sleep the rest of the day. It is really hard work, but it can get better. And the thing about DID that is interesting is that it's important when we're working with you, and if you're working with a therapist, make sure that they're treating all of your personalities equal, because they're all part of you, and they were created as a way for you to survive a trauma and for you to get through it. And so if we have to create an alternate person, an alternate universe that we kind of live through.
It's not an alternate universe, this is reality. I don't exist in an alternate universe, I exist here. Alters are not a choice, it's not something that we can control or choose to have.
Maybe our alternate personality is someone who's really feisty and fights back, because we needed that in the moment when we were maybe being abused. And so know that they all have a right to be there, and they're there for a reason. But it's causing us trouble, right? Our functioning is impaired, and so through therapy, the whole...
They have the right to exist, but it's causing us trouble. That is like saying that a child has a right to exist, but they are causing the parents trouble.
whole goal is slowly diffusing them through working through the trauma. So know that it can take time. Talk therapy is the number one recommended way, and individual therapy, not family therapy, because it's really healing you and working on you so that you can feel like yourself again and be that one united self 24/7. I hope that that gives you a better.
I am myself all of the time. Echo is herself all of the time. Erez is himself all of the time. We're not. Yes, she sure did. Granted, this is this is a video from 8 years ago. But I think these two are less ancient.
Dissociative identity.
This one was 3 years ago.
Hey everybody, happy Thursday.
And this one was 10 years ago. Okay, there's no sources in any of her descriptions. I want to do this one next just because it is from 10 years ago.
Thursday, I almost forgot what day it was because my week has been all over the place. But when it's Thursday, I'm on Twitter. So if you ask me questions using the hashtag KatieFAQ, I've already been on and talking with many of you. And then I have a journal topic at the end. Thanks, Selena, for that. And to give you a little update, I had a very successful LASIK surgery yesterday. So my eyes are getting a little tired today after driving, and good so far. Good, it looks like I'm healing with that. Might be some different things. That is a wrap up of what's going on with me. And I'm going to Mammoth this weekend. He says I'll be fine. My eyes still like the 3 questions as well as a journal topic, like I said. So let's get going. First question. Wow, I really talked a lot and didn't breathe. Okay. Can a person have DID, which stands for Dissociative Identity Disorder? I have a video about that if you're curious, if you want more information. Or any disorder that usually comes after a trauma without a trauma occurring?
No. Short answer, no. Long answer, absolutely not.
Now, there are a couple things that we technically cannot get if a trauma hasn't occurred, like PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. If there's no trauma, then we can't technically have PTSD. We can have anxiety, we can have anxiety disorders of any sort, but DID and things like that can definitely happen to people who haven't had a trauma.
No, it cannot. No, it cannot. You cannot have DID without CPTSD, which is complex post-traumatic stress disorder. Yes, that happens and that is valid. But those systems should not be claiming that they formed without any trauma, because that just harms everyone, including themselves.
Even had many clients who, because a lot of times if we have an eating disorder, we self-harm, a lot of times that means that we've had some kind of trauma. It may not be just one thing, it may be like our childhood was really rocky, we had parents who fought a lot, we had a drug-addicted sibling. It could be any number of things that we felt really scared and we didn't feel safe. And those things can happen because of a trauma, and they can happen for many other reasons. That's honestly why I got into psychology, because the human brain is so amazing. It changes for reasons that we don't know. It changes for reasons we do know. And then sometimes later in life it'll heal itself from things that used to ail it. It's amazing. So the reason that we may have depression, anxiety, dissociative identity disorder, any mental illness, it doesn't always mean that it has to come from a trauma.
DID is a trauma disorder. It forms from trauma. That is it.
So it's definitely possible for you to have dissociative identity disorder or DID, an eating disorder, self-harm, mental illness issues in general.
Yes, you can have mental illnesses without trauma, but a trauma disorder cannot exist without trauma. I like that joke. Collector's edition.
Even if you haven't had a trauma, not everyone has a trauma. Sometimes it's a genetic component, sometimes it's a stress-related component, other stuff is going on. It could be any number of things. So just know that you don't have to have a trauma in order to have DID.
Yes, you do.
Or an eating disorder or self-harm or anxiety, depression. The only one that I know that is pretty strict and /rigid with the diagnosis is PTSD.
Disorders that stem from trauma require trauma to develop. What a concept.
Okay. And there's PTSD, and in the short term, it's brief anxiety disorder or I forget what it's called, but it's when it's more of a short-term thing. We can have, for a brief period of time after a trauma. Those are the only two that require a trauma. Okay. Question number 2. I've gotten to the point where I know that I need more help than just therapy, and there's an IOP program that I want to join, but I have bills to pay, and I need more than just a part-time. I did a video about this before. Physicians also feeling like therapy, if you need a higher payment, how much you're in the meantime while you go on disability, because I know bills don't stop coming. Even if I stop working, they're still going to come, and we need to be able to care for ourselves. Okay, question number 3. How can I make time for recovery with 5 to 7 hours plus of homework a night? There's never enough time, and I'm already often up till 2 or 3 in the morning. Now this all...
Okay. So I guess that first question was all the title of this video was going to go over.
Dissociative identity disorder, or DID, is so often misunderstood and stigmatized by people online, which is why today I'm going to explain what DID is, why it happens, and offer 4 ways that we can better manage it. And if you're new here and you would like to subscribe, we would love to have you. I talk about all things mental health, from narcissism to dissociation to eating disorders and everything in between. I promise you will leave with helpful information that you can share with your friends and family. Let's jump into the video. When trying to figure out if someone has dissociative identity disorder, or DID, we first turn to the DSM to look at the diagnostic criteria. Now, for those of you wondering what the DSM is, it's basically a guide that mental health professionals use to help us decide what mental illness someone has. The first symptom someone must have is a disruption of identity, characterized by 2 or more distinct personality states, meaning that we have multiple personality states that are very different from one another, and it's noticeably different from who we were before we had these various personalities. And this is essentially why it used to be called...
This was 3 years ago. Core theory is outdated and not the most widely accepted theory. The theory of structural dissociation. Everyone is born with an unintegrated personality, just basic states of being, such as I'm hungry, I'm tired, things like that. Around the ages of 7 to 9, as you learn and grow, those personalities, those basic states of being will integrate into one full personality. Once that happens, it can't be broken. if there's prolonged trauma before then amnesia walls are going to go up to protect the child from the knowledge of that happening to them so that they can continue to function. So when those states go to integrate, they cannot because of the walls between them. And that is why you develop multiple personalities instead of just one. It's not someone being born as one full person and then splitting off into a bunch of other people.
Called multiple personality disorder. The second criteria is that we have gaps in our memory of everyday events.
No. And I already talked about this. Everyday events, important personal information, and or traumatic events that are inconsistent with ordinary forgetting. Straight from the DSM-5. So no, it's not just everyday events.
We can think that we're just being super forgetful, but this type of memory loss isn't consistent with normal forgetting. For example, no matter how hard we try, we can't recall what we did yesterday. It can be uncomfortable, not to mention jarring. And similar to all dissociative disorders, when we are dissociated, remember our brain kind of pulls the ripcord on reality. We're just kind of spaced out. During that time, our brain is going to have a very difficult time forming memories or allowing us to recall any information. And we can have these gaps in memory. They can last for hours, sometimes days, and for many people, even longer than that. Now, the third criteria and the final one is that these symptoms must cause clinically significant distress or impairment in social, occupational, and other important areas of functioning. Now, the key piece of this is that it causes distress, meaning that I'm bothered by it, right? If it's happening to me, I'm bothered by it.
I have heard that. And I know that there have been people with DID who have been in things like brain scans, and they've switched while they're having it done, and different parts of the brain do light up. So that does make sense.
Or it impairs us, right? So it's causing distress or impairment. And impairing us means we can't do what we need to do. Because I often hear the question from my patients and other members of our community, Katie, if it's not bothering me, then why do I need to work on it? The answer is because it's getting in the way of us being able to live a healthy and happy life. So you can see why the distress and impairment is an important piece. And I found a really helpful explanation on a mental health blog called Sane Australia, where one person shared their experience, and they said, I quote, "For starters, my voices are inside my head. They are not external sounds. They're more like conscious thoughts that you have in your mind. However, my voices don't sound like a conscious thought pattern. They have their own sound. It's similar if you listen to people around you in a restaurant. They're distinctive. Like when your partner or boss talks to you, you know the sound of their voice and can tell them apart from other people. This is the same with my voices. I can tell most of them apart when they talk. There are a lot of misconceptions about DID, which I think makes it harder to understand. For example, I hear from a lot of people that they think DID means we have like complete alter egos, like different personalities, like a whole different person is coming.
Yes. It's not an alter ego. It's not something that we have control over. Alters are their own people. I am my own person. I am different from Echo and Ares and Malachite. We are all different, and it's very dehumanizing to even imply otherwise.
Coming forward and acting on my behalf. Almost like I don't have any say or choice in the matter.
Yes, that happens.
But DID is more like I'm split into parts. I think we can all kind of agree that, like,
Already talked about this. That is not how it works.
the me that shows up for work to be a therapist is different than the me that meets my girlfriends out for drinks on
That's normal personality shifts. That's not DID.
a Saturday night. Or let's say I'm really frustrated. I've had like a total shit day. That person, like agitated Katie, is going to be different than like sitting watching my favorite show, gotten everything done I needed to get done that day, right?
And that's not DID.
Those emotional states can even be different. And I like to think of DID like that because
No. That is also true. Especially with systems who have better communication, especially between certain alters, they can agree to a switch. That happens with us sometimes. This is just watering down what DID actually is and making it sound less severe.
these different parts of myself irritated Katie or like protective Katie and more passive Katie or work Katie, right? Those are
Personality is fluid. That doesn't mean that you are a completely different person like an alter is. That is also true. Usually we cannot communicate and agree to a switch if our amnesia walls are too high. But that is just us.
they're all kind of parts of who I am. And these different alters or personalities are often just like those different parts.
No. I am more than just blunt and honest and protective. I am my own person with my own likes and dislikes and hobbies. I'm not just a part.
It's just that one part will kind of be the front runner or the one that's leading the charge. Now, later in that same blog post, the author writes, "A major thing at home is doing things I don't remember, moving things in the house, getting blamed for things, receiving groceries I don't remember ordering, and regularly changing what I'm doing. I mean, I have to tape most TV shows because I would miss too much if I didn't. For example, 15 minutes into a show, I may find myself up, walking to the laundry because a voice remembered the washing. No sooner
A voice, an alter. I'm more than just a voice.
as the washing hung out, then I'm in the kitchen putting the kettle on. Next, I'm back in the lounge to rewind and watch what I missed on the show. But then, 10 minutes later, I'm back up because the other voice wants the cup of coffee. That's just a typical dysfunctional day, and it's very exhausting. It's these gaps in memories that I find make DID really debilitating, and the reason many
But what she just described was not gaps in memory. That was other alters speaking to whoever was fronting. That is valid. And I am sorry that you have to deal with DPDR. We know how exhausting dissociation can be. and would not wish a dissociative disorder on anyone.
Many of my patients have reached out for help for it. Imagine not knowing what you've done at work or at school or what you've said in your relationships. Imagine kind of like coming to and being in a totally different place and you have no idea how you've gotten there. I can tell you how many of you and my patients have told me they'll sometimes like wake up driving a car. That's so terrifying. Not to mention just exhausting if we don't know what we've done or not done and we keep redoing or sending that same email. People can think we're losing our minds and it can feel that way. And I find this component, that second diagnostic criteria, the gaps in memory, to be the most debilitating. It's also important to know that DID is primarily due to trauma, especially...
Not primarily. It is entirely due to trauma. I suppose there is the lack of a support system and disorganized attachments to primary caregivers as well, but DID is only caused by trauma. There is no other cause. I don't think I've heard of OSDD3. I've only heard of OSDD 1A and 1B.
Childhood trauma, which makes sense if we think about it, because when we're traumatized as children, we often can't fight back or get away from our abusers. So we go into the only other option, our freeze state. And we know trauma's born out of that freeze state, right? Now, freezing can cause us to dissociate as a way of getting through the trauma without having to be fully present. That's why I call it our brain pulling the ripcord, because it kind of gives us the space between ourselves and what's happening so that we're almost like outside of our bodies watching something take place versus being present in our body feeling it, right? It gives us some distance between what's happening and the pain that we're feeling in the moment. And just to offer another example of how DID can feel, here's a comment from our community about their personal experience with DID. And they share, quote, "Living with this disorder is incredibly hard. We have good days and then bad days. Days I can't recall important information, and I've ended up in strange places and panicked. It has destroyed relationships around me. Some were toxic, but others not so bad. And these alters or personalities I was unaware of until about 2 years ago, after a stay in the hospital, and a therapist finally followed up with correct medications for my symptoms. We feel that we might get somewhere. But some of my alters are older. I have a child and a male. And day to day, it's a struggle figuring between who's fronting, etc. And I could go on, but dissociative identity disorder is incredibly hard."
I think I was going to say something. Right, there's no medication for DID. Full stop.
But it has also saved my life at times from the abuse that we've been through. Now you can see how these symptoms, especially the struggles with cohesive memory, can make it very difficult to live the life that we want. And that's why it's so important to find ways to better manage it. And with that, let's jump into 4 tools that can help us better manage our DID. My first tip is to identify the triggers that cause us to switch personality states or alters.
Sometimes it's not a trigger. Sometimes an alter just wants to front. All alters have the right to exist. All alters deserve time in the body if they want.
This way we can be prepared with coping skills ahead of time to
Yes, exactly. We are on antidepressants and an anti-anxiety medication. say it right? Yes. Okay.
Kind of calm our nervous system. Now, these coping skills may even distract us enough so that we don't switch when it's not convenient for us, like maybe during a presentation at work or something like that.
You can't always control your switches. It's not something that's just going to be, oh, I can control it now. You'll never be able to 100% control it. You can communicate with your alters and say, hey, I'm doing something important. I need this time to do this. It doesn't guarantee that a switch will not happen, but it can help.
And this can help us stay present and in control of what we say and do during an argument or, during a really stressful test, for example. Knowing what to look out for ahead of time gives us those important.
That sounds amazing. I think something like that would be nice for us to do. Our littles haven't fronted in a while. Mostly just because it hasn't been safe for them. But it's been better lately. So we'll have to do something like that.
Important minutes to take action before our DID symptoms take over. My second tip is to learn a few grounding techniques. If we can feel our alter or voices coming on, maybe we feel, like a sense of overwhelm or anxiety, maybe our palms get really sweaty, we may want to go in the bathroom really quick and splash some cold water on our face. Or
that is true. A lot of our littles don't like masking or don't feel the need to.
try to count colors in the room. And the way that we do this is just by looking around and counting how many things in the room are brown, and then black, and blue, etc. And a similar method I like is also the alphabet game, where we look around trying to find something that starts with the letter A, and then we move on to the letter B and C, and so on. Doing anything that keeps us present will help.
Yes, grounding techniques can be helpful. They don't always work, but they can
help us better manage our DID. My third tip is the use of medication. Since DID and other dissociative disorders often don't happen on their own, like, for example, DID often accompanies PTSD.
Not often, always. If you imagine PTSD on one side and DID on the other, how I've always kind of visualized it, and this is not saying that any trauma is less severe than others. CPTSD is a more severe form of PTSD. OSDD is a more severe form of CPTSD, and DID is a more severe form of OSDD. So if you imagine it on kind of a spectrum like that, DID is the most severe form of PTSD. So yes, it always accompanies PTSD.
Which could also come along with anxiety or depression or any other slew of mental illnesses. A medication to help treat those other mental illnesses may be to your benefit. So if this is of interest to you, talk to your psychiatrist and see if medication could help you on your path to recovery. And my fourth and final tip is to work with a therapist, and if possible, one who's a trauma specialist. Most trauma specialists understand DID because a lot of what they do is helping people work through trauma that has caused us to develop symptoms of dissociation, which DID is a dissociative disorder, right? So a mental health professional overall can help us better process that past trauma or whatever the cause was. Again,
I would say I find it strange that she did not bring up communicating and working with your alters and your system. But at the same time, I am not surprised because of the way that she's spoken about alters in this video. Like, alters are only an inconvenience. Like, they only cause problems. Like, it's the worst thing in existence to live with alters. And this is a more recent video. This is from 3 years ago. I could give her some grace on the other one from 8 years ago, where she was talking about core theory. But 3 years ago, it's very, very obvious that she has not done her research properly. It's obvious that she has not spoken to systems about their experiences. Yes, she read off that comment from one, but every system is different. Every system experiences things differently, have different levels of communication with each other. That is true. There are no sources in... Oh, there's one source. Only one. And of course she is sponsored by BetterHelp, which is not a good company. Exactly. It's very obvious that she just does not know what she is talking about, and she should not be speaking about this. She is not a trauma specialist. She is not even just a general therapist. She is a life, marriage, and family therapist. I think that she needs to focus on more videos about what she is trained in, and not try to educate about things that she does not understand, because all she is doing is spreading more misinformation. And that's very, very damaging. I'm tired. I got through those 3 videos. That is true. I just wish that people did their research more and actually cited their sources instead of having 90%, not even 99% of the description being just self-advertisement more. Especially when it's a topic like this that is already stigmatized, that already has so much misinformation out there about it. Once this VOD goes up on YouTube, there will be a pinned comment with our source list. Please do your research. It is fine to want to talk about something and bring awareness to it. But you need to make sure that you're not spreading misinformation and saying very damaging things and saying very dehumanizing things. That is not surprising. I'm fairly sure that I've heard that a lot of the therapists on there are not certified at all. That adds up. I am tired. I don't believe we've eaten yet today. Our voice is kind of shot. So I am going to go. Have to do some things today anyways. Thank you everyone for watching. Thank you for the comments. And I hope that everyone has a good rest of their day.